far, we've learned that the distribution of different forest types around the world can be explained by predictable global climate patterns. But what is a forest? Well, it's a community of plant and animal species interacting with each other and their environment, dominated by trees. In this session, we'll explore broad patterns in the biodiversity that ultimately determines how a given forest looks and functions. As you might already know, rainforests are by far the most diverse terrestrial ecosystems on Earth. While they cover only 7% of the land surface, they harbor 50% of all known species. The most biodiverse place on Earth is the western Amazon basin. Here, a single hectare of forest, an area of 100 by 100 meters, or 2 football fields, may have over 500 species of trees. By contrast, large areas of the Russian taiga may have only 3 tree species. The diversity of rainforests typifies a more general latitudinal trend in biodiversity. As one moves from the poles toward the equator, the number of species increases. For our purposes, we'll define biodiversity just as the number of species present, but there are other ways to define biodiversity. The number of species present at any one time is a balance between speciation, or the evolution of new species, and extinction. The latitude trend holds true not just for trees and other plants, but for insects, birds, mammals, and aquatic organisms too, really for nearly all groups of organisms. For example, there are about 900 species of birds in all of North America, while the country of Ecuador in South America has over 1,500, and Ecuador is only about the size of the state of Nevada, or a little smaller than Italy. But why are the tropics so much more diverse? There's a surprising number of hypotheses, and clearly more than one factor is at play. Here's what we know. There's more total energy as you move toward the tropics, which supports faster growth, higher biomass, and greater abundance over longer time periods. Perhaps this ample energy provided lowered the extinction rate and provided opportunities for diversification, allowing species to accumulate. We also know that precipitation is positively correlated with diversity. There's certainly more precipitation in the tropics than in the temperate zone, and even within the tropics, forests that receive more precipitation are more diverse than those that receive less. There's also evidence that more seasonal climates have lower diversity, even if total precipitation is similar. For example, seasonally deciduous tropical forests in coastal Ecuador that lose their leaves during the 3-month dry season have lower diversity than humid forests at the same latitude that have no dry season. The explanations for high tropical diversity resulting from lots of solar energy and a stable, warm, wet climate are known as the productivity and stability hypotheses, respectively. Both of these hypotheses suggest that biodiversity patterns are a result of abiotic factors. The latitudinal gradient in biodiversity is extremely important, but there are other factors that correlate with diversity and help explain the biological differences between forest types. One is altitude. Diversity tends to decrease as you go up a mountain, perhaps in part because temperatures get colder and growth rates slow. For example, higher elevation montane forests that occur in mountainous areas like the Andes have lower biodiversity than rainforests at lower elevations. Biodiversity increases as area increases. The easiest way to think about this is that the entire United States obviously contains more species than any single state. One reason is that larger areas may encompass greater heterogeneity than smaller areas, thus offering more different types of niches. Nevertheless, there is more land area in the northern hemisphere outside the tropics than in the tropics. Yet the tropics contain more total species. So area alone cannot explain the high biodiversity found in the tropics. Diversity tends to decrease as you get further from a source population. This trend was first documented on oceanic islands. Those further from the mainland have fewer species than closer ones. But it holds true in patches of habitat on land as well. A small remnant of forest in a sea of agriculture will retain more species if it is closer to a large tract of forest. The reason for this pattern is that habitat islands further from a source patch are less likely to be colonized. Only the strongest flyers or the most mobile animals will be able to cross the large distance. Individuals that do make it also are more likely to go extinct on a habitat patch far away from where they came, perhaps because living conditions may be quite different. This tendency for smaller and more distant islands of habitat to have lower diversity than larger, closer ones is known as island biogeography theory. Now that you know how abiotic factors influence biodiversity, let's explore the biotic factors that play a role.